Can't you see? This is right from the tea on the side. No one is allowed in heaven since you're here. You should know we will never let you go. You can cry, you can shout, but you can't get out. This is a start for no return. This is the mark for no return. Those who stumbling, those who be bumbling, never can get out.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, welcome to the agency. Thanks for listening. This is Candy in Toronto.
And Eugene, also in Toronto.
Hi.
Hey, this will be our last show of the year.
Oh my gosh.
I guess this might be the last one that we're doing face-to-face.
It might be, yeah.
For a while.
Yeah, it might be. Unless we put some in the can.
We might just put some in the can. You never know.
We
never know how much content is in our little brains.
That's right. And I'm feeling kind of verklempt and emotional about this because this year has been a crazy year and this podcast has been part of my sanity. And believe it or not, if you didn't know that I was... that this was helping. It probably doesn't look like it was helping, but it's helped massively. Like even today, I have a sense of like purpose. Like, okay, I've got to do... This is my job.
Yeah, it's kind of focus, and it's a regular focus.
Totally.
We have to do our research.
That's right. We do
content.
endless research for this podcast.
We actually do. I mean, you would think that we're just talking shit off the top of our heads, but we actually do spend a little bit of time.
We do. We look up actors' names and how to pronounce them. I do a lot of trying to pronounce things, practicing, and I'm probably going to blow it a couple times today. I wanted to do, I don't know if you had something to start with or anything?
Well, I wanted to talk about an article that was sent to us by one of our listeners.
Oh my God, that's so funny because it's such a good article, and it's totally related to something I wanted to say about the spy movie we watched last week, because I was going to do a fix-it, but it wasn't really a fix-it. It was a response, because I forgot that I wanted to talk about good and evil and community in Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy.
Do you want to start there, or do you want to start with the article?
Either one. I just want to say that it's just such a weird coincidence.
Well, we got this article, and it's a really interesting article. It's from Emergence magazine. It's called "The Serviceberry: An Economy of Abundance" by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Don't know anything about Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Me neither.
But really interesting article that talks about harvesting serviceberries. Along with the birds and the bees getting pollen from the flowers and the birds filling up their bellies in the serviceberries and the humans filling up their bellies in the serviceberries. And it leads to a discussion of what this author calls the gift economy.
Which is an anthropological term. Okay. It's a controversial topic in anthropology, argued for decades.
Why is it controversial?
Well, because there's so many different... There's religious gift economy, there's... what would be called tribe economy, different villages. Okay. Gift economy is everywhere.
Okay. The example given in the article talks about some kind of tribal economy in which hunters come back from the hunt with more than the usual amount of meat.
Right.
And they have the technology or the ability to do things like salt or smoke the meat in order to store it, but instead what they do is they invite more people from surrounding areas to come and enjoy the feast, and they have a great big feast. And so the idea of storing the food is to store the food in the bellies of your friends.
That's right. I store my meat in my brother's belly or something
and
like that.
And it's a really, really lovely idea. And in the same way, she talks about the serviceberries, storing the surplus serviceberries in the belly of the birds.
That's
so
right.
The birds can thrive as well. And it introduces the idea of the currency in this kind of economy is gratitude and reciprocity.
Yes.
And I'm going to read a quote here. Gratitude, the thread that connects us in a deep relationship, simultaneously physical and spiritual. As our bodies are fed... I'm sorry, I can't read my own writing here.
great.
And we're nourished by the sense of belonging, which is the most vital of foods. Gratitude creates a sense of abundance, the knowing that you have what you need. In that climate of sufficiency, our hunger for more abates, and we take only what we need in respect for the generosity of the giver. That's a very, very interesting idea. I would really like it if she didn't just lob that one out there and leave that ball float over the plate, but instead give us some examples of how that might work, because it isn't intuitively obvious that our hunger for more as humans would in fact abate, and I'd like to see some evidence of that.
Wow, and that would have to be specifically human. I know I've had some reading on that. A lot of what she talks about is in a lot of one of my favorite writers. I've got to say, one of my favorite writers, who passed away a couple of years ago, Daniel Quinn. He wrote the book Ishmael. I've mentioned it a couple of times on here, and he describes in this. It's a talking primate, like a gorilla, and he says that there's takers and leavers in our world. And this reminded me of that there's a different way of looking at things, that are you a taker or a leaver? And I guess certainly he might use the example, a lion goes and eats and then sleeps. He doesn't just keep eating and killing randomly. He understands his own body. Now, where I think Thomas Merton said that human beings don't know how to live. We have to look at animals. Like other cultures, hunters and gatherers, they look at animals to know how to live, because we kind of don't know how to live. We don't know how to stop and be sensible. So I think that is good. I'm trying to think of an example. Can you think of any? Maybe not.
Not offhand.
No.
I thought it was a very interesting idea, as I said, but I really wanted her to provide us
More
with
examples.
some backup when throwing an idea like that about how if we changed our economy, it would change our behavior.
Oh,
and I'm not so sure. Maybe that's true, but I don't know that. I don't.
Right.
It's not intuitive to me.
Well, I've said 100 times on this podcast, how we make a living affects how we think. So I related to her saying that, because I guess I should come up with a backup of an example too. I think the only way we could tell is by looking at how other different people think about life. She's certainly saying that the indigenous people that she gives as teaching her about gift economy, they do seem to have a different way of looking at the world. And I think that's what Daniel Quinn is saying, that there's a philosophy in there of that you leave things, or you take and you hoard them.
But there's another way of looking at it as well, which is some years the serviceberry crops are fabulous. And when they're fabulous, we might want to make some jam.
Yes.
So that next year, when we have a crappy crop, we can still enjoy the serviceberries with the jam that we've made. And I don't know if that's always a bad thing. So the implication of the article is it's a better thing to feast and share and not store than to store. But there are good reasons for storing. Sometimes there isn't meat, and when the hunters go out to find meat, they don't find any. So if you've smoked some and you have it back in the shed, well, you don't starve. And so that's why we do that.
Yeah, and also sometimes if we need vitamins every day, maybe having all countries and cultures preserve things. They have ways of drying fruit and everything. When you eat dried fruit in the winter, you're getting vitamin C that you wouldn't be able. I don't know how long a human being can go without vitamin C. So there's that idea too.
But on the other hand, the idea of sharing and feasting and storing the food in the bellies of people to create that feeling of abundance and satisfaction
and
community is a beautiful thing, especially when you consider that when you share your bounty, that the idea of gratitude is that other people will share their bounty as well. And so it will work out that we always have what we need. I think that's what she's getting at. I think
that is true. And she says that scarcity is something we've been programmed to believe in. That's a construct of the kind of economy that we live under. So she said
maybe, but famine can be real.
Famine can be real. That is true.
There could be no food. There could be no meat. There could be no nothing.
Right.
So I'm not 100% buying it. I like the idea. I love the idea, but I would love to see some modeling.
Okay. Well, I can think of some current contemporary gift economies.
Okay.
I think I wrote them down. Let me find my notes. I know donating Organs is one of them.
Sure.
Donating blood is one. Where did now, I've got so many notes here that I'm not going to be able to sort it out probably. Isn't that funny? Because I took down notes for Go lessons, for this podcast. What's another way of doing... I know there's more things. What's another? Donors? Gift economy. I know that my friend's parents worked in Japan a lot, and everybody gives gifts. In fact, you have to have so many gifts ready that you've got to take a suitcase of gifts, and you come back with a suitcase of gifts. And there's also an idea in Buddhism. There's some Buddhism where they think giving is actually, you get merit. And I don't believe that. It's a very particular form of Buddhism, and that's not true. There's a poisonous part with gift giving, too, that you own that person.
There's also gift giving that degrades into the idea that you always bring something, and sometimes the something is something that nobody wants or uses or needs, as opposed to you bring the bottle of wine that we all share,
or the Bob Dylan scotch, which I brought you but didn't bring Sheila anything. There's a good example. We got bagels yesterday.
There you go.
You're right. That is a good example. And then or you bring something that you like and everyone's allergic to, but those are usually accidents. Giving gifts is tricky on a good day. You got to really know the people. Organ donation, folk music, book boxes, and Burning Man are all contemporary examples of gift economy.
Folk music is a very, very good example. In folk music, we own the songs together.
Right.
And I responded to a post on Facebook the other day that had to do with music and the proprietariness of music. And of course, we see so many situations where pop musicians sue one another. You stole my riff. It's my riff. But when you step back a little bit, and a great example that you can find on YouTube, and we'll post it on our Facebook page as well, is something that was done by the Ukulele Orchestra of Great Britain, and it's called "Fly Me Off the Handle." And there's 6 people with ukuleles or 7 people with ukuleles, and they start playing a piece by Handel.
I love this video.
And then over it, a piece by Frank Sinatra.
Yes.
And then over it, I Will Survive. And then over it, Hotel California. And until there's 7 or 8 different songs that are basically the same.
The Beatles, when they started out, apparently, they took all the beloved traditional music in England, and they wrote down the chord combinations, and they applied that in their music.
Sure. Because in Western music, which Western pop music is remarkably simple music. It uses mostly, and of course, people are going to say, "Oh yeah, but what about Frank Zappa? He has very complex." Right. Yes, of course, there's examples, but most pop music uses 2 to 4 chords,
totally,
and the same 2 to 4 chords in more or less the same combinations that naturally resolve the musical patterns. And so to sort of say that I own this music, I own this lick is a little bit silly when you step back and you realize how close so much of that music is.
Right.
So when Woody Guthrie took the music for Wabash Cannonball and wrote in the misty crystal glitter of the wild and windward spray, men have fought the pounding waters and met a watery grave. She tore their boats to splinters, but gave men dreams to dream of the day the Cooley Dam would cross that wild and wasted stream. Well, that's great, man. Right. It's great that he's borrowed that melody to apply those gorgeous lyrics, right? And in the same way, he took the old time tune Red Wing and added lyrics to that. It was an instrumental old time banjo fiddle tune, added lyrics, and suddenly there was a Union maid who never was afraid.
Right. Well, that's funny because I think there's a speculative history movie about somebody who writes all the Beatles music. I guess they didn't know the Beatles, or maybe the Beatles never existed. I haven't seen the movie, but I saw a trailer for it. I thought, that's interesting. And I guess he's super popular, or maybe he goes to a country where nobody knows or in the future or something. They don't know the Beatles. So he just starts playing the Beatles, and, he's very popular. So if we did have an event level extinction and somehow you survived and you knew all the songs, you could be like an amazing performer because you'd get all the credit.
In old time music, which I like to play, we very much own those tunes together.
Right.
And there is a standard repertoire. So when you learn to play old time fiddle or old time banjo, you learn the repertoire. And we all share that repertoire and we reinterpret it. And the way we play the tunes changes depending on where we live and how our community likes to play it. So as an example, within old time music, there are particular regional styles, such as round peak style, in which the fiddle and the banjo play in a particular way.
Right.
And in Canada, we have that as well. If you look at our fiddle traditions in Canada, we have, for instance, Cape Breton fiddle, Ottawa Valley fiddle, Quebecois fiddle, Métis fiddle. There are really specific regional approaches to fundamentally the same repertoire.
Right.
Fascinating stuff.
It is fascinating.
And it's really different. And if you go to YouTube, and it's another video I'm going to post as well, April Virch, who's one of our great Canadian fiddlers and a Canadian Grand Champion fiddle player, when she was considerably younger, she did a video outlining Canadian fiddle styles, and in 10 minutes she basically plays through all the different styles, and you can hear how different the language is. It's like a dialect, a fiddle dialect. Fascinating
vernacular,
business.
if you will.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
I've got another old time ditty for you. Property is theft. I mean, we've got that notion. We have this idea that we name things, we own things, we're the stewards of the land. I don't believe we are stewards, but I know that there is a belief system that we're supposed to be taking care of this planet. I don't think it needs us at all. The gift economy is almost an illusion because the gift economy, I think, is the natural state. I think it is how we would exist if we weren't trained to behave in the way we do. But we have so many good examples of gifting that I think it's a little bit of everything. The freedom that we know as hunter and gatherers and the power and quality of life it's never left us, that quality of life. The hunters and gatherers have much better quality of life than we do. And that never left. That's why we have things like Quakers and homeschooling and weird sub-economies. It's probably why we have market level pyramid schemes and stuff like that too.
Sure.
They're all ways to try and even though it's capitalistic in itself, it's trying to resist this oppression that you can sometimes feel in this and in any culture.
Another example to go back for a minute to the old time tradition, where I mentioned that we have this repertoire, but then later on, people started writing tunes that fit into the repertoire. And when I first went down to Rockbridge Festival, I met a fellow down there named George. And whenever one of those tunes that were written more recently came up, he said, well, this one's not old time, this one's hippie old time.
Oh, yeah, and that's Steve's, right?
That would be, for an example, would be, we know a fellow, Steve
He's been
Rosen,
on the podcast.
who wrote a tune called Nail That Catfish to a Tree, which has been assimilated into the repertoire. So many people play it, and without even knowing that Steve Rosen wrote this tune, it's just an old time tune. But then people who are more familiar with the repertoire might say, oh, that's a hippie old time tune. That was written by this guy Steve.
Right.
So it's fascinating because it just becomes assimilated into what we own together. And even though people know that's Steve's tune, it's also still, it's our tune, damn it.
And I think we'll find that in punk music or jug band music too, is that these bands travel together, they learn each other's songs, and sometimes they weren't recorded.
Well, sure, we see it
them
in the blues tradition and the jazz traditions as well.
Totally.
Absolutely.
So that's a weird, and you're hoping, the other person might play. When Kurt Cobain, he always wore t-shirts of bands he liked, and those bands would suddenly come in. He gave gifts by wearing these bands' t-shirts, because then everyone would go buy their records, right? Of local bands or people he knew or traveled with, and he brought
an interesting idea.
He brought a lot of attention to those bands. Little known fact. Well, unless you were into Nirvana like I was. That's cool. I love that article, and we're going to share that on Facebook. It's so good. We're very glad one of our friends, listeners, shared that with it. It was fantastic. I thought it was very good, and like I said, it reminded me of Daniel Quinn. My friend John in Vancouver, when he took anthropology, his professor assigned Ishmael to everybody by Daniel Quinn. I thought that was pretty cool.
Hey, we should do a comfort food diner segment today because we did something special. We talked. I think last week we talked about omelets, and then I had mentioned that I was going to teach you how to do a frittata.
That's right.
Well, we not only did it, but Candy made a video of me demonstrating how to make a frittata.
And next week, Eugene's going to paint a picture of me playing Go.
So let's talk about how to make a frittata, and we're going to post the video on the Facebook page
repetitively.
You can watch it. But particularly this time of year when we have feasted, and even though we've shared with everybody, we still have a fridge full of stuff. Frittatas are a wonderful way to use up stuff in your fridge.
I can see that is true. I mean, you almost put a salad in there.
I almost did.
I saw the urban peasant cook lettuce.
Oh yeah,
and in fact, one of our old friends, Anita, she used all his recipes, and she would cook dinner by putting lettuce in the bottom of a pan with peas on top of it. And I could be quoting this recipe wrong. I'll have to go find it.
That sounds interesting.
But I was blown away that you could cook lettuce.
Of course you can. It's a green.
It's a green, I guess. Yeah.
So the thing with frittatas is they're totally flexible. They're an egg dish.
Yes.
They're kind of like, if you've never had a frittata, imagine like a quiche with no crust.
That's true. That is what it's
kind of like that. And the bones of a frittata, the stuff that you really need is you need eggs. And if you're going to use the kind of pan I use, which is a 9-inch cast iron pan, well seasoned, you can also use a non-stick pan if you want. You can even use a stainless steel pan, and you might go, wait, you can't use a stainless steel pan for eggs, but remarkably you can. When a frittata is baked in particular, it comes off from the pan.
It does. It did.
Which is pretty remarkable. And I'd seen a video on one of my favorite food channels, which is Food Wishes, with Chef John, in which he talked about that. He made a frittata in a stainless steel pan, and his explanation was he thinks it has something to do with science.
I love it.
So the bones for a frittata, you should have some kind of onion. So, I mean, you don't have to. There's really no rules, but I'm giving you some guidelines.
Onion's always good.
So onions are really good, or leeks, or shallots, something in the onion family, ramps. You should have cheese.
Oh yeah.
Whatever cheese you like, and you can have any kind of cheese or any combinations of cheese. And you should have some dairy. You can use milk, or we used cream because we had some. You can use, beyond that, almost anything in the fridge. You can use any veggies, cooked or uncooked. You can use leftover pasta, which is fabulous.
Crazy, mind-blowing.
Leftover potatoes. We're just pouring some more tea here.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to segue into that, so I just started doing it.
So basically, you can add anything you want. You can also make your frittata vegetarian or not. Okay. And frittatas do like pork. Frittatas like bacon. Frittatas like kielbasa.
They sure do. So does candy.
Smoked sausage, all of that kind of thing. So when we made...
So what did we do yesterday?
We started with some... I had some double smoked thick sliced bacon from Starsky's, and we chopped some of that up, and we started by cooking that bacon in the pan. And
did you put any oil in it?
You don't need to, because the bacon has plenty of fat, and you're going to render that out. And as the bacon cooks, you can start adding your onions.
The longer cooking things, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
and then after your onions, some garlic, and whatever is going to take a little bit longer to cook, like peppers. I think we added half a red pepper. We added 1 red chili chopped up. We had some mushrooms we found in the fridge, some cherry tomatoes cut in half that were starting to get just a little bit crinkly. They were saying, "Eat me now," or forever hold your peace.
Yes.
So whatever you have, you can
had
add.
something pretty unique in there.
Oh yes, in our garden, and I guess this tells us that it's a measure of global climate change or global warming.
All right.
Here at the end of December, out in my garden, I was able to pick some kale and some rainbow chard and some parsley, as well as some oregano, still growing in the garden.
Nice.
Barely.
Right.
But just small leaves. But I was able to pick it, and they were in good shape.
And they had snow on them, even. But
It was,
shake off.
it was
the snow.
pretty funny when you have to shake off the snow.
But you also did something else you haven't mentioned yet. That was also pretty radical.
What did I do that was radical?
Wasn't it tofu?
Oh yes, I forgot about that. I had in the fridge some fried tofu that I had bought up at Grant's Asian Market, and my intention was to use it in a stir fry, and it got lost in a drawer in the fridge, and the expiry date was quickly approaching. So I thought, what the hell? Let's try putting tofu into our frittata, and I think Ken, you were a little bit horrified with all the stuff.
Well, pasta threw me off. The tofu threw me off, but you know what? It was delicious. I didn't try the pasta yet, but it was delicious.
The thing is,
tofu was
when you
amazing.
frittata-fy the food in this cast iron pan, everything just becomes wonderful.
Yeah. No, it was really good, and it seemed really easy. I'll do a version. Probably when I get back to Chicago, I will give it a go.
The basic process is you start all your veggies cooking. If you have some meat, you get your meat cooking in it as well. Or if you have some leftover bits of meat you want to throw in, whatever you like is all good. So you get all of that cooking together, and then you have your eggs, and you need about 10 or 11 eggs for a frittata in a 9-inch cast iron pan.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It could be maybe 9 eggs, it could be 12 eggs, but somewhere in around there. And then you add some dairy, and I didn't measure, but maybe I added a cup of cream?
Maybe, or
three-quarters of a cup.
I would say.
Something like that.
Safe. Yeah, that's a lot of eggs. So
yeah, and so use a whisk, and you just whisk all of that together until you break up all the yolks.
Yeah, you put some oregano in there too?
I added some oregano. Yep. You could add any herbs or spices that you like.
Yep.
However,
kosher salt?
I did put some kosher salt in as well.
Yep.
I think I put the kosher salt in while the veggies were cooking.
Oh, there you go. That's a good idea.
But whatever spices you like, you can add to your frittata, and it's super fantastic. Then the way I do it, and there are some different approaches to this, but the way I do it is I pour my egg and dairy mixture into the veggies and whatever else you have in your pan, and I start stirring it around, and then I start stirring in my cheese, my grated cheese, all but a small handful of it, which I'm going to save to put on top. So I stirred all of that in, and your heat is on medium on the stovetop, and you keep stirring until the eggs just begin to
coagulate. I don't know what the word is.
Scramble.
That does not sound good. Cook. Yeah.
Cook. They just begin that process of coming together.
I know it must have a word.
Then what I do is I put the rest of my cheese, I sprinkle it on top, and I put the pan into the oven at about 350 degrees for about 15 minutes.
I can't believe how good it is.
And it all puffs up, and it cooks and just becomes this wonderful unit. And after about 15 minutes, it looked like it was just about done. And then I changed the oven setting from bake to broil.
Right. Good
And
idea.
I broiled it for another 3 or 4 minutes, and what that did was it browned that cheese on top of the
Totally turned it umami.
frittata.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was looked gorgeous.
It really did look gorgeous.
It really did look gorgeous.
And you'll see a beautiful photo of it in the video.
So we
in Eugene's
we then
kitchen.
took it out and just let it be for about 10 or 12
Yeah.
minutes, something like that. You have to let it kind of cool and set for a few minutes. It doesn't have to get cold.
No, it's
but,
still plenty warm when we
but
ate
you
it.
just let it sit there and rest for 10 to 15 minutes even. Then slice it and eat it with salad,
Anything. I think we
toast,
had
whatever
bread.
you like.
We had some little bit of bread, and
Yeah,
my god,
so-
it was so good. The cheese was so amazing in it. That was my favorite.
Really
Top
yummy,
flavor. Yep.
super flexible because you can use whatever you have. If you have eggs, cheese, some dairy, you can make frittata with whatever's in your fridge.
Where's frittata from?
I always thought it was from Italy.
Okay.
I have a friend who told me that in her family they always use leftover pasta in their frittatas, and I've done that, and it's super tasty.
Super good,
too.
huh? Oh, that is
Yes,
so funny.
because the eggs and the dairy and the cheese suspend that pasta
Okay.
into this
Yeah.
wonderful.
Well, I guess it's
frittata
like cheese
unit.
sauce in a way, only it's egg sauce.
Yeah.
That was great, and we got the video out there. You can enjoy watching. Eugene, if you don't know how to make it, you're certainly going to know how to make it by the end of it. It was a lot of fun. I wanted to talk about go back to Tinker Tailor.
Okay, let's do
Because
it.
one thing I want to say was that my concern was over good and evil, or good and bad in that, and it kind of stayed with me because everyone was so independently motivated. It seems each guy seems so selfish, and that we talked about the privilege of them, and that was part of it. But it seemed like some of the rules broken. The whole point of it, speaking of gift society, is it isn't paid that well. In a way, a spy job is a gift economy because you are doing service to your community. In theory, you're supposed to be doing service.
Yes, but we also saw, I think that George Smiley had to some degree the realization that there wasn't that much difference between them and us during
Right.
the Cold War.
Right.
He says at one point, I forget to what character that, maybe it's to Bill Hayden, to the mole, that he's asking why he did it, and he said because we get beyond the ideology. You think you're right, we think we're right, but beyond that, we're all doing the same things.
Trying to get
the
by.
behavior is the same, the spying is the same, the techniques are the same.
Oh, interesting. I thought he was talking about ideologies too. The ideologies are supposedly different, but I thought he was also saying
He's sort of saying behind it all, we function in a
same
similar way, right?
despite the ideologies
Yes.
or their personal motives. Okay, because that really bugged me. Whereas, for me, good and bad, I don't believe in good or evil. For me, the definition of good is life affirming and community based. That is how I would measure whether something was good or bad.
Interesting way of looking at it.
I wanted to pull on that idea that there used to be an idea that you were doing a noble service. And that's why it doesn't matter how much you get paid. It kind of is even though you were recruited, it should be a calling. And they had corrupted that. That was long corrupted. Except for George Smiley.
As well, though, they also recruited people who have particular character traits that make them suitable for the job.
Yeah.
So someone like the character of Ricky Tarr, as an example, is the ideal scalp hunter. He looks at the world in a particular way. He is always very careful about what he says and how he couches the truth. Or sometimes he'll tell you the truth, but he just won't tell you all the truth. And it's his nature makes him a great fit for the job.
He also was a lady killer. So I
Yes.
think that he was able to use that because he had a wife that he was very devoted to, enough that he got fake passports for.
Yes.
And yet he seemed to be in love with his asset, who was also a spy,
Yes.
right? Or would that be an asset? Or would
Although
that
I
be
think in the spy business, at least in some views of it, sex is just a tool.
it's just a tool. It certainly is in the Americans.
Yeah.
And on James Bond, it doesn't seem to be like a tool. It just seems to be a pastime.
Yes.
That's part of the part that's not fun about James Bond. Is it's like, I mean, it's funny, humorous that he's so sexy, but not funny that it's not.
But it's also why the stories aren't as interesting.
The stories are not as interesting. That's right.
Hey, speaking of interesting stories, last night I watched I'm Your Woman.
I watched it too. So good.
I really liked it.
I really
Sheila didn't
liked it.
like it so much, you
Okay.
know. I think that Stagg watched it as well. I think
Yep.
he liked it. I really liked it a lot. It's a brand new 2020 neo-noir crime drama directed by Julia Hart.
I didn't look up anything. That's funny. It's no wonder it's so good. It was directed by a woman.
And it stars Rachel Brosnahan,
She was great.
Orenze Keene, and Marcia Stephanie Blake. It's streaming on Prime now. I really love this one.
I love it. She's as good and compelling as any actor. She stole my heart, and I loved her clothes. But never mind that. The film is the coolest looking film. It looks like
Set
a
in the
really cool
70s.
1990s film, actually, like one of those 90s hipster movies. But oh yeah, set in the 70s.
Set in the 70s, and it's very much, in a way, like a 70s kind of crime drama, except that it turns it on its head.
Yes.
Because mostly the 70s crime dramas are all about the men.
That's true.
And this is completely from the point of view of this woman who, yeah, she was involved with a guy she knew was a criminal, but she didn't really know anything about his crime stuff. And to give just a very brief plot synopsis, she's there being a housewife. Her and her husband Eddie, they can't have children, so Eddie just shows up one day with a baby and says, "This is our baby. You can name it anything you want."
right.
And he goes off and he does his crime stuff with his crime people, and she's sort of left out of this, looking after this baby, trying to figure out how to be a mom. And then one night Eddie is away. One of his criminal partners shows up and tells her, "Look, you got to go on the run right now." And he gives her this big sack of money and hooks her up with this guy named Kel and says, "Kel's going to keep you safe." And off they go. And Kel drops her at a house.
With tons of food, a bag of money.
Everything that she needs.
Yeah.
All she has to do is not talk to anyone. But she's got the kid, and the kid just is crying all the time. And she's trying to deal with that, and she's lonely, and she's stuck in the house, and a neighbor woman shows up and tries to befriend her.
Tries to befriend her. And, yeah.
Turned out it wasn't her best idea of the day.
She's not supposed to talk to anybody, but I'm telling you what. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, it was just.
What we find out has happened is that Eddie has killed the leader of the crime bosses, the boss of bosses,
right.
and it's thrown the whole city's crime life into disarray. And there's this great big struggle for power. And beyond that, no one really knows anything except that Eddie has killed the boss. And they're looking for Eddie, and so they're searching also for Eddie's wife. And they come, they show up, and she thinks they're gonna kill her, but Cal has left a phone number. She phones phone number. Bad things happen. Lots of bad things happen.
But it's turned on its head in ways that it's actually a very minimalist action film, but I would say it was a crime action for sure.
Yes, the first half in particular, I would say there's a lot more quiet thoughtfulness than there is action, and there's more action, I think, in the second half of the film.
I thought it was really perfect. I give it a 10 out of 10. I absolutely loved every actor in it. Every performance was incredible. The baby was adorbs. So there's also a whole thing where there's a little bit of adoption culture in there where the baby and the mom don't bond necessarily right away.
And Cal is looking after her, but he has to keep leaving.
Right.
And then we meet Cal's wife.
I know. Who has a son.
Who has a son.
And a dad.
And the dad is Eddie.
Yeah. No, the father, her father.
Oh yeah, her yes,
father.
no, it's his father. It's Cal's father.
Cal's father.
It's Cal's
Okay,
father.
thanks.
And then she had been married. Terry, who was Cal's wife, had been married
All
to
right,
Eddie.
so we are telling you everything. That's okay.
Oh, did I ruin another one? Oh my god.
You're going to forget it because when you start watching this movie, what we've said today won't make any sense. You'll be like, I think first of all, most people are like, why did they like this movie so much? It's really slow. And once you accept that, you're going to really, I just thought it was so good. It was, it has a harsh lesson, much like Shane and Paris, Texas. Now I watched Paris, Texas with, Sheila and Stagg couple weeks ago, and I had not seen it in years, maybe since it came out, and it's one of my very favorite films. I'm going to write something about it on my art site, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. But the harsh lesson is that men can't fit into this domestic world, and they shouldn't. They're dangerous. And we find that out in this story too.
Yeah.
I'm Your Woman, and I think it's called I'm Your Woman even in reference to that. I don't know why it's called that, but it's interesting that it does have something to do with this. Shane was dangerous.
I think it also has to do with the fact that she transforms from someone who is very passive,
yes,
to someone who ultimately takes charge.
Oh, she sure does take
She
charge.
just takes charge and says,
really
I gotta
fantastic.
do this. And she gets some coaching along the way on how to take charge. She doesn't know it, but she realizes, yeah, I got to do this. And so the story in some ways is really about the transformation of this character from this really passive person to, all right, the women are going to take charge now and we're going to look after things and we can survive.
Yeah, and it's got a little subtle, it's maybe not as exciting as Fargo or Bad Girls, where these women are taking charge and we've got a genre twist on crime drama, but it's definitely like Blood Simple. It's definitely in a great lineage, and I highly recommend it. It's also beautifully shot. It's beautifully shot. I'm so happy it's a female director. It shows that we can make movies about women that we're interested in doing, and we don't have to have a female James Bond to do it.
Right.
We can do it just with a woman in the main character, and all the characters are given dignity and a moment to shine. They are fantastic.
Yes.
Cal's dad is just lovely.
Yes, and you're going to pull your hair out when you watch it, trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah. Oh, no,
the first
it's
half,
so
you
good.
don't know.
It's
She
so
doesn't
good.
know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. You just know is that she's not safe.
And the moment the baby smiles at her, I almost started crying. It's just so beautiful. So there's just such good things with it. And, it's a commentary again on patriarchy in movies as well. It's got a lot in there. I think film students are going to love it. I think it's going to be at the pop culture. It's going to be mentioned at the pop culture convention. By the way, I got accepted at the pop culture convention.
Yay! So what are you going to be doing? Tell us what you're going to do.
I'm doing 2 things this year. I'm so excited. I've really
and
changed
it's going to be
the subject.
virtual this year, right?
It's virtual. Yes, it is. Coincidentally, we've made a lot of friends there. We just have such a good time, and this year not going is really showing me how profoundly inspiring it is, because I come back with a list of things to watch, topics I've never heard of. I've told you my favorite panels are the Indigenous. I'm still going to get to see those panels. It'll just be on Zoom, right? But we made a friend probably about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. They have a fire and ice. You go to this conference, and like any conference, they have a party for you. And there's some really, trendy hors d'oeuvres and drinks. It's not free. The food's free, but you buy your drinks, and it's in the conference hotel room, right? So a lot of people don't go to it. But Stagg and I, we don't know anybody, and we're like, hey, free food, we're going. And we've told other people, and they're like, you went to that? Like, our friend Rick, who is the president of the McCarthy Forum, he wouldn't be caught dead there. He wants to go to the Route 66 diner, and we've gone there with him too. But anyway, we go to this, and I don't know why. This guy just came over and stood with us. We're standing at a table. I mean, you have to kind of socialize, right? But we're not used to anybody coming to us. Usually people are like, oh, they're boring, and they leave. But this guy came up, and well, God damn it if we just didn't fall in love with each other. His name's Richard. He lives in Ireland, and he's in Cork, and he's a professor there. And we've seen him a couple of years in a row. We look around, oh my God, Richard's here. We're not on any of the same wavelengths at all, except music. He's always in a music thing. And he's a synth player. He used to work at CBGB's and doing the sound there. Yeah, for a long time. So anyway, Richard, so I look, and George has booked me on a panel. We interviewed George Sieg here last February. And on
an excellent interview.
An excellent
really
interview.
great episode.
Very fascinating guy.
If you want to go back and find it.
Definitely. And I sent it to Richard. So I'm looking at the program, and Richard's on the same panel as I am on Esoterica.
Excellent.
Now, that is not my presentation. I'm doing a panel on basically artificial intelligence, Westworld, and Blood Meridian. But I'll post the description of the panel on our Facebook page, because George has reworked it, of course, in a much better way than I wrote so much stuff that he was probably like, I have to edit this crazy thing.
I can't believe that.
Yeah, that's true.
Candy has sent me, just for a little backstory, she sent me in the past, she'll work up these
Pieces?
Or
outlines
for her presentation, and I'll read them and I'll go, what the hell? Because there's everything, including the toaster in there. There's so many ideas.
It's extra.
Because you have so much to talk about that it's all jammed in here, and it's like, okay, I just can't handle this. I need to simplify.
Right. Well, and my sister does the same thing. She goes, no, it's really interesting, but there's so many things in there. You know what? I just go my way, because I do believe it's very important to put all these ideas together. It's kind of the point of the discussion. Mm-hmm. It's about connectedness. These things are connected, and you only get 15 minutes. So trying to show how these weird connections are happening, you really cram it in. I mean, Richard is the one who I had to quote on one of my videos on YouTube that I presented a couple of years ago. Stagg sat next to him and heard him say, "Oh my fucking Lord, is she going to count every star?" So I've actually quoted him on my YouTube page as my blurb. Okay, so and I did read out and then I'm doing my paper, and I read out the outline that I did for that a couple of episodes ago, but I didn't have a title. So the title I submitted, which did get accepted, thank goodness, I'm so excited, is called Dead Reckoning: The Cult of the Stars, Navigation, and Exploiting Natural Phenomena as Inspiration in the Structure of Cormac McCarthy Writing. So there you go.
All right.
So I brought in about 3 topics at least into that. Onto the one topic of Cormac McCarthy.
Excellent. And that's going to take place in February.
Yeah, February 22nd.
And hopefully we'll be able to maybe put together some interviews or something around
I think we could.
The conference.
And maybe I can video something when it's happening, some of the panels. I'll definitely take photos. I usually do post photos. So I'm pretty excited about that. 2 different events on that conference. I can't believe it.
That's excellent.
And I'm just very appreciative to have met George, and he's such a character, and all the crew at the Cormac McCarthy panels. A lot of fun.
I think that's going to be tremendous fun, and I know it's something you look forward to every year.
I really do. Never mind all the amazing food and sights to see in Albuquerque, but we're not having that this year. Next year. Mm-hmm. We'll have vaccines and we'll go next year.
Right.
Yeah, so that was pretty exciting.
Hey, we saw I didn't see all of the series, but a good chunk of it. A really oddball series called Upload.
Oh, yeah, I didn't get through as much as you guys did yet. I'm working my way up, and I loved it, too.
It's, I think it has its weaknesses for sure, but it's got a kind of dark comedy about it.
Yeah, it does.
Upload,
which I really enjoyed.
Upload is a story about a future in which, if you know you're going to die and someone's got the money to pay for it, you can get your consciousness uploaded. And when they upload your conscious, they burn off your head.
Yeah.
So that's
not
it.
Good. That's good. You can't come back in your own body.
You can't come back. But you're
living virtually.
They scan everything in your head, and then they build an avatar that looks just like you with really, really great graphics. So imagine you're now living in a video game.
I know. I feel really emotional about it. I have very mixed feelings about it. It provokes something in me, Eugene, because I actually did feel like crying when they were first doing it, and then I'm like, well, maybe it would be good. I don't know. And
sometimes they refer to it as heaven, and then you realize that there's different companies, so you could shop heavens.
Right, that's insane. I didn't get that far.
And everyone operates on a map, like a video game map, but you're restricted to interacting with a smaller group of people depending on where your unit is, where you live in this virtual world. Okay. And so you don't see millions of people using this map. You only see evidence that there's millions of people because the screen rate slows down,
Oh.
and there's somebody points out to this character that there's lots of people using this because you see someone diving into the water and it looks choppy as they're diving
Oh
in.
yeah, there's a glitch.
Yes.
Right.
And
There's someone else because there's a glitch, which I thought was kind of
yes,
cool.
and there are other glitches as well.
Right.
Like if you miss breakfast, there's something that if you hammer on in a certain way, it produces a donut.
That's right. That's right. I think I only saw an episode and a half. I'm very intrigued. I felt quite provoked. It had an emotional potential, and then it also had a really superficial potential, which is also fun. Humor, a lot of humor, a lot of
humor.
dark comedy.
And you can phone your loved ones.
You can phone your
who
loved
are
ones.
alive.
That is so bizarre to me because it's really, they don't explain everything, so you've really got to take a leap of faith
and
that somehow they have saved your consciousness.
Let's say you have a lover and you die and your lover has uploaded you. You can still have sex with your lover who has to wear a virtual sex suit.
Yeah, it's so inventive because it doesn't make any sense when you tell me it. I'm like, what?
But they just say it exists, and so they show you
and
the
then they
sex
show
suit.
you
It has
it's
all these little
amazing.
fingers.
I know.
In it.
I really think it's a very exciting program. I can't wait to watch more of it.
It's a lot of fun. Oh, it's the other thing that's really key in it is if you have any problems in the virtual world, you ask for an angel. And the angel is your customer service representative.
And if she's on shift.
Yeah, but
if she's not, if it's not
then
her
you get
hours,
someone else.
You get someone else.
A different angel. But in this case, a few things happen. The main protagonist begins to have a relationship with his angel, his main angel, Nora, and as well we find out that maybe he was murdered. Yeah,
that's right. There's like a murder mystery in here. It's funny because when my cable goes down, I have to call for help or my TV's not working. They are angels.
Absolutely,
I'm very happy when they put everything back on.
It's charming and it's funny. At times, I want it to be darker. I want it to be more serious and darker.
Yeah, I think that
some
would
of the
be hard
comedy
to
in
take.
it sometimes is too superficial.
Okay.
But still, I find it hard to stop watching it.
I feel it's very fresh, very young, very positive.
I don't know any of the stars, but it's starring
I love that.
Owen Daniels, Allegra Edwards, Robbie Arnell, Kevin Bigley, Andy Ello, and Janab M. Johnson, who's fabulous as Alicia,
she's so good.
who is the angel Nora's co-worker.
She's incredible. She really is. I want to see what else they're in. What a great concept. Something along a similar idea. I was with my family, and we watched a family-friendly show on Disney Plus called Soul. I would have recommended it, but you have to have a membership to Disney Plus. But it's called Soul, and I think you would really like it. I'm sure you'll find it one of these days. It's voiced. It's all Pixar, and it's basically this jazz musician, and he's a school teacher, and he tries out for a band, and it's the voice of Angela Bassett, so she's always amazing, and she plays saxophone, and gosh darn it, they hire him. And so he's so excited because he's not just a teacher now, which is really sad state on teaching, right? And that's on purpose. And he falls in a manhole and dies. And so when he has this gig, right? Yeah, I hate when it happens too. So he goes into another world. And not unlike Upload, there's incredible imaginative writing about these different places that you might go. There's a way station, of course, and there's it looks like an airport. What are those rolling escalators? It's like a rolling escalator, for lack of a better word. It's a platform. It turns on a wheel. What are those called? a moving sidewalk? It's like a moving sidewalk
yes.
up into a ball of light. And he's like, I don't want to go there. He finds a way. He tricks the system. He rigs it. And he gets back with these other souls in a kind of another station that they're souls that are working towards going back to Earth. Into a body. It's so good. It
seems to me that these sorts of shows are written for a generation which isn't ours, a generation that's grown up on video games.
Well, I can see why you say that, except I'm going to show precedence. I'm going to say Clarence from It's a Wonderful Life. I'm going to say The Preacher's Wife. I'm going to say there's a whole Heaven Can Wait with Warren Beatty. I think that there's incredible writers out there, like in science fiction, who find ways to talk about the meaning of life or existence or existentialism, and they put it into these things. Inside Out. Did you see Inside Out? Probably about 10 years ago. I was doing movies at the Buddhist temple, and we'd have a movie a month, and that was one of them. And it's inside the head of a little kid.
Oh, no,
And
I didn't see that one.
Lewis Black does anger. I can't remember who does joy. I'm blank on that. Somebody totally appropriate. But they have these little characters in their head that are each emotions, and that's the same studio that's done Soul. Inside Out is one of the greatest movies. If you haven't seen Inside Out, you must see it. We got to go look for it. It's animated. The animation's gorgeous, and like I say, it's going into the psyche of this little kid who's quite depressed. And so that you've got sorrow personified, you've got joy personified, you've got anger personified. And in this movie Soul, what you have, like I said, there's little personalities of people who want to get back into the world. And Tina Fey plays this one little character who is completely despondent and cynical and nihilistic. She hates human beings. She hates food. She never wants to be back in a human body. It was restricted her. She wants to stay in her way station, if you will. It's such a good movie. The music's really fun, that he's a musician, and Jamie Foxx is so talented as a musician and a performer. I really recommend Soul. I have to see it again because I didn't understand some of the philosophical theories in it. It was so good. And so we watched that with my grandson, so that was a lot of fun.
The closest I get to usually anything Disney is I really love an album that was recorded in the 80s by Sun Ra and his orchestra called Second Star on the Right, or Second Star to the Right.
Sure.
And it's his tribute to...
That's Illuminati.
Okay.
It's in the Cult of the Stars.
It is his tribute to Walt Disney.
Okay.
And it was very important album to me. I just love it. I can listen to it over and over and over again.
To it today.
And in fact, I did a series of paintings after listening to their version of one of the songs that's on that album, which is called "This Is the Forest of No Return."
Okay, well,
so I did a series of Forest of No Return paintings
Cool.
a few years ago. Let's do it this afternoon.
Yeah, let's do it.
And you're gonna find yourself singing "Zippity Doo Dah" and "Whistle While You Work" all day.
Okay.
It's perfect to hear Sun Ra do a tribute to Walt Disney.
Haven't you ever seen Saving Mr. Banks?
Nope.
Okay. Well, that's about... I can't explain it. I don't want to explain it. It's sort of about Julie Andrews. It's sort of about Walt Disney. Stars Tom Hanks. It's very good. I think it's very good. It may not be your cup of tea. Anyway, Soul, 10 out of 10. Have to recommend it. Upload, if it's any bit as good as the first episode that I watched. It's an astounding. Also going to be up there for analysis, and I think it's going to give lots of philosophy students things to fight about and argue about. It's pretty cool. Something else that came to my mind while we're talking about community, and I wrote it down in my notes for Tinker Tailor, Soldier Spy, and probably with gift economy. And I don't know if it's an article I read, right? Maybe when we started this podcast. It was in the fall of 2019, and it's an interview with Mariami Kaba, and she's an organizer. She has a book coming out in February.
An organizer like Marie Kondo, or an organizer like an activist?
Great question. She's an educator, an organizer, and social justice warrior.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So, and she has this article and this quote, "Is everything worthwhile?"
She's got all the cliches going. She's
she's
a warrior.
amazing.
Is she a guru as well?
She might not have said the word warrior.
Okay.
I said that.
All right.
She's really... she's an amazing philosopher and thinker, and she's doing all the right stuff. And one of this quotes is, and I'll share this article too, "Everything worthwhile is done with other people." And I think that ties into Upload, it ties into Soul, it ties into George Smiley, is just about connectedness, and it ties into gift economy, is whatever it takes, and she has a new book called "We Do This Till We Are Free." And it's Abolitionist Organizing and Transforming Justice. So that's her new book coming out in February, which I'm pretty excited to check out. And it came to my mind with thinking about a gift economy and George Smiley, community, and whose side is what, when they're really shouldn't be competing in the spy business. It should really be that they are more in common than they have difference. Even, we talked about China, and Zizek says that China is a capitalist society without democracy. We keep calling it communism, but it's not.
Well, I could see that. Certainly, I've been to Vietnam a couple of times, and well, there's a bustling business economy in Vietnam. Everybody's got some kind of business going. Often they're service, tourist-related businesses, restaurants, and there are various different levels of sophistication in terms of how the setup is. You know, from a restaurant on the top floor of a fancy hotel to a lady and her daughter setting up a barbecue and making bun cha on the street. So there's all of that, and you know, I had imagined, because Vietnam is run by the Communist Party, that the setup would have been different than it is. For instance, for education, everybody pays for education, but the basic level is heavily subsidized by the state. But there's a second tier, and if you are successful, say in your food business, you can maybe send your kids to the enhanced school.
Okay.
And the enhanced school that you have to pay more for provides things like foreign English teachers. And it's an economy which is so tourist-centric that if you're able to speak English, you can do better. You can have an edge up on some other people in that economy. And so learning English is a very, very big thing there. And then I learned that the medical system, you have a very basic medical system level that everyone gets. But if your business is doing very well and you can pay more, you can, same hospitals, different door, different level of service. You get the enhanced level of service.
Would that be more boutique-y, like you're more comfortable, a private room, or would it
And
be
maybe
a
faster
doctor?
service. I don't know all the details of it,
Yeah.
but I also know that if you're a tourist there and you become injured, you go to yet a different facility. You go to the tourist medical facility, which is a third tier.
Right.
And they want to make that medical experience as good as possible for the tourists, because you don't want to lose the tourists.
Right. Well, see, now this ties into what is good and bad. If we polarize every community and every system, that's weakness on our part. That goes back to what's being controlling our thoughts, the way we analyze something. Because we're saying that Vietnam is communism, but it sounds like it could be feeding into socialism a bit. And socialism totally has small businesses, totally has independent businesses.
Yes, and I think in Vietnam's case, the idea of independent small businesses was opened up, I think in the early 90s. I could be a little wrong on the dates there, but began to be encouraged by the government. But you still have to be very careful what you say in terms of expression, and there are more and more artists pushing those boundaries, but still there's a strong state and strong rules. For instance, we went on a food tour when Sheila and I were there together on a back of Vespas, and the guys who were taking us around said that they love to gamble, but they couldn't gamble, even though there are some casinos in Vietnam for tourists, but residents aren't allowed to gamble there. However, when Lunar New Year, or Tet, comes up, everything shuts down, including the police. So there's a few days there, and they say during those few days where they know that no one's going to be coming and looking, they gamble.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's fun.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I love it. They found a way around it.
They found a way around it, but that highlights for me that I'm used to living in a society where I could say anything I please.
Can you?
Well, yes, I can.
I don't know. I wonder. I think we can.
There may be some consequences.
Yeah, well, that's true.
You know, even when I say things that might be provocative on the podcast, there are consequences. People will say, "I'm not listening to that guy anymore."
Well, yeah, that's true. I guess we're not going to get thrown in jail for what we say. But you're
Yes.
right. And consequences, I mean, that's the other thing, is I find in a lot of discussions in the States, I should be able to say this. Oh, you can say that, but I also have the freedom to say, I don't agree. And maybe you're rude or something, you know. Maybe that's not compassionate or that's insensitive. You have a right to say anything you want, but we have a right to tell you.
And
that
nothing
we
is really
feel
black and
uncomfortable.
white in different cultures,
Right.
how that
Right.
all that operates.
Right. And look at, it's funny you're talking about a different country and how we label it. If you ask so many people in the United States what they feel about Cuba, they feel terrible for it. Poor Cuba. You ask anyone who's traveled from Canada to Cuba or maybe from Europe, they go, oh my God, Cuba's figured the whole thing out. I'm talking about in the 80s and 90s. They go, they live the greatest life there. But you cannot convince an American that believes that they don't. If they think that they just live like communists and they have no money or school or anything, they can't compute it. Because we're coming with, there's an example of what you think, what you make your money by, you will believe differently. So a capitalist in the United States will not believe that Cuba is a great country to live in. If you believe that this is the best way to live, you're not going to believe that hunters and gatherers had a better quality of life than we do. You're not going to believe it because we're programmed to believe that our way, most of the time, we think what we do and think is the best thing. I mean, we talk about this all the time in the podcast. You and I can watch the same movie, and I'm like, are you sure you watched that movie? Because I thought it was fantastic. And you're like, that's a piece of crap. So, I mean, that's our personalities coming.
Sure.
Or are we arbiters of taste? I mean, I think probably I'd like to believe I was an arbiter of taste, but I don't think I am. Because I have a pretty high tolerance.
An influencer. You're an influencer of
I don't
taste.
think I'm an influencer, but I think that I certainly... I guess what I have is I have a broad appetite and enjoyment of a lot of... Hey, I watched The Masked Singer. I don't make you watch The Masked Singer, and I posted that on Facebook today.
Thank you.
There were
You
snowy
did-
owls.
you did
There were snowy owls on The Masked Singer.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the costume, and they were cute as fuck.
Wow.
And,
which we should say, it's somewhere in my neighborhood.
Yes.
And apparently, the local group who are the stewards of that particular
there's your first
area.
mistake, thinking you're a steward.
Yes, they don't like people to say where this
Oh, yeah.
is. But somewhere in my
Hashtag.
neighborhood, there is a snowy owl. And for many, many years, the snowy owls come back to this particular spot. And they find a place that's way out on a dock where they're safe. People can't go out there in the
Right.
winter. And they sit on the dock. Well,
So
usually there's
cute.
one. We'll sit on the dock all day and maybe just move its head around. And they're really hard to see because they're
Oh my
quite a
God.
way out there and they just blend right
They
in.
blend right in, and I've seen him post the odd pictures on Facebook and that. But we got to see it. Stag and I went out for a walk with him, and
And we got actually a pretty decent
did.
view the other day. It was on a closer dock. And then come dusk, sometimes you'll be lucky enough to see one start to fly. And they fly around this little harbor, inspecting the duck buffet.
Yeah, we might want to phrase this very carefully. This could take a dark turn.
Yes, because they are killers.
Yeah.
And they
didn't-
hunt every night.
I didn't know they ate duck. I thought they might eat rats.
I think they eat ducks as well as mice and rats and whatever else
Okay.
they can get.
find.
Probably
Don't
bunnies.
let your cat out.
They're quite huge. So, like, if you see one sitting on this dock, it looks like they're darn near 2 feet tall,
Oh,
right?
it was huge. I was surprised how chubby it was. And also, have you ever looked at the moon with binoculars and you're kind of like, oh, it really does have craters, right? You're like, oh, I thought they were just bullshitting that. I thought that was a conspiracy that the moon really does have craters. Well, the snowy owl really does have these beautiful, delightful feathers.
You know, when
They're
I
so
was in
pretty.
high school, my vision changed and I became somewhat nearsighted. And what that meant was that I couldn't see detail further away. And when I
About
finally
10 years later, you got glasses.
Well, when I finally realized this, I got glasses. And when I put the glasses on and looked around, it's like, wow, look at those trees. They have individual little
I
leaves.
know. I
Isn't that
remember you
amazing?
saying that.
It was just
So
it was
funny.
mind-blowing.
It
Because
is
I had
mind-blowing.
got so used to how my vision shifted,
mind-blowing.
I hadn't realized that it was a problem until I did, and I got the glasses. The first 2 weeks, I was like... dizzy with all the
Right.
images around me in such clarity. You know, I thought everything was like Impressionism.
I know, it's so sad. It's so scary. It's lucky that was a tough time. I mean, did you drive right away? I think you did drive right away. Or did you have to take a break?
No, I think I was able to cope with.
But I do
with
remember
driving.
you were like, you just took acid, and you're like, wow, look at that, man.
And it's like, oh, I can read the street sign. I know what the streets are that are coming up. That is so cool.
So terrible.
And
so
you know, it
funny.
reminds me of the last day that my father drove. My father had a problem with his vision, and he became nearly blind with macular degeneration. And he was still driving, and I hadn't realized how much his vision had deteriorated because we compensate, and we also have a tendency to hide our weaknesses.
So true.
And
I'm hiding mine. Honestly.
you have weaknesses?
I thought you were going to say, no, you're not. You mean you have worse ones than those?
So we were out driving one day, and my dad said, son, that traffic light coming up, what color is the light? And I said, Dad, do you think you could pull over to the side of the road?
Did you really say it?
Yes,
like
I did.
Shit.
Because I think it's time for me to start driving you around. And he never drove again. He realized pretty quick that you know, when you can't tell what the what color the traffic light is, it's gonna really be a problem.
It's gonna be a problem. I didn't know that was an option in deterioration of the of vision, that your colors would go.
I don't know if the colors exactly what he could see.
Maybe they were fracturing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I just know that he couldn't tell one from the other,
refracting.
and it was time to stop the driving. It was it was a tough, difficult time because he'd always driven everywhere, right?
And it's one of the cool things about cars. We say that maybe cars are really bad and they're bad for the environment, but they do give a lot of people a lot of sense of autonomy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's the one thing you can kind of keep doing while you're old, for the most part, actually, because as long as you can see, it's not hard. I'm
banking on fiddle and banjo playing.
Yes, I think those are also something you can play for a long time too. You can do those too. Yeah.
So late last night, I watched a film that you recommended.
Oh yeah.
And I'm really glad I did.
Good.
It's an Amazon production on Prime. Released, I guess, streaming only because theaters are closed for the most part. And it's a film called Uncle Frank, written and directed by Alan Ball, starring Paul Bettany, Sophia Lillis, Peter Macdissey, and Steve Zahn is in it.
Steve Zahn. I love him.
Oh, that's Steve Zahn.
Yeah.
And this a film, it's set in 1973. And, well, this film is a lot of things, isn't it? It's a coming out movie.
Coming out. For sure. A coming of age.
A coming of age film for another character. And it's a road trip movie.
It's a lovely, lovely
all
movie.
in one. It's totally charming. It's got lots of cliches in it, but that's okay. The acting is wonderful. It's really, really charming. I just loved Frank and his boyfriend, and Beth, Frank's niece.
She was adorable.
And it's...
So it starts at a family party, right?
Yes.
Or is it a funeral? Oh, no, it starts at a family gathering. And he's the uncle who lives in New York City, and he's a professor. He's super cool. He smokes. And she's a teenager, and he kind of gives her a few words of wisdom and some direction in life.
She's called Betty at the time.
Right.
And he starts to tell her, you can be anything you want to be. And she realizes she doesn't want to be Betty anymore. She wants to be Beth.
Yeah, she changes her name, and he supports her on that. And we don't know about the rest of the family. We find out that the rest of, I would say, rather than cliches, I would say some of the characters have stereotypical behavior.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Does that make sense? It's the same thing. I just kind of thought that it doesn't mean that the storytelling is cliche. I think that the characters are exhibiting racial and gender biases in a stereotypical way.
Yes. And this character, Uncle Frank,
who is the greatest actor, Paul Bettany. I adore the ground
wonderful.
he walks on.
Great job.
He's
I
gorgeous.
think in many families, at a time when nobody talked about people who were gay, who had different sexual orientation. But still, there was Uncle Frank's in lots of families, right?
Yes, there were. Yeah. We had people that my family knew. You know, my grandmother had a card reader that she would bring over for parties, and he would read everyone's cards with like a tarot card, but with regular playing cards. Because I told you, my family's kind of crazy that way.
I had an uncle who did that as well.
Did you really?
Yes, my uncle.
Stop it! That's so awesome.
Yes, he only did it when he was drunk. He's
well, this guy might have been
he
drunk.
didn't get drunk a lot, and he was a very, very dignified fellow. And when he got really drunk, he would get a pack of cards and he would read people's fortunes.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, the other word for alcohol is spirit. Let's not forget that, right? So I can't remember his name. It was in Calgary, and I mean, obviously long gone, but he was single, lived alone, very well put together. And I remember by the time I got to be about 17, I realized he was gay. And he did drink. But anyway, he was amazing. We'd go to his house sometimes, his apartment. He lived in a single room occupancy, right? Where you need those in every city, and we keep getting rid of them, and then these guys don't have anywhere to live. And by these guys, I mean, they might have been alcoholic, or they might not have any family, or their wives kicked them out.
Or people, for whatever reason, are living on their own.
Yes, and that's not a bad thing. Some people are going to be single for their whole life.
Yes.
That's part of life. Anyway, so he had, and it was a marvelous apartment in Calgary, and sometimes we would go there. Sometimes my mom and I would come into town, and then we'd go get this guy and get a reading. Anyway, yes, I mean, you don't know that they're gay when you're a kid sometimes, or maybe you do. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little bit different now because it's a lot easier for people to come out.
Right.
Although not everywhere, for sure.
Not everywhere, right? And I don't know if my grandmother was completely, had tons of gay friends. And she called them all her boyfriends. Okay, Grandma. And my grandfather called her all her boyfriends too. So it was pretty funny. Where were we? Back to Uncle Frank.
For me, the timing of it is set in 73.
Is it?
It's set in 1973. I was 13, 1973. So it could have been my family. It could have been your family. Although it's South Carolina. Right. But still.
The family's wonderful.
You know, you look at all of our families, you look at people who have really intolerant views, really just ill-informed views, right. People who are just stubborn and strange. Yeah. And you see a big family that gets together that has all kinds of wacky people with different sort of ways of living and ideas about the world.
Right.
And so for me, I thought it made me think about my own family.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I like that when it does that. It's true. I think it made me think about my teenage years too. So I love the other actor, Peter McDessie. He plays his partner, and he's actually
wonderful character.
He's actually with the director. He's the partner of the director and
the
writer
really?
of the film.
Wow.
They're a real life couple. And Alan Ball, the director and writer of this, did American Beauty, which I think is one of the greatest movies ever made.
Sure, great movie.
Right? And I had a friend who said that was the year of a triad, that the three movies that changed his life. Patrick, if you're listening, I doubt you are. It is. I haven't talked to Patrick in a long time. So the American Beauty, The Office, and Fight Club, those movies changed his life. And that, again, I think those were all in the year that changed movies, 1999. I think they were all that year. American Beauty got Best Picture, right?
Oh, did it? Yeah.
I think so. Sorry, I've kind of kept talking over you. So what else about the story? The set design, the costumes, amazing.
Yes, and
Margo Martindale.
Your
new favorite actor.
We've been joking about Margo Martindale because she's in this. She was in The Americans.
Yep.
She was in Sneaky Pete.
Yes.
We're also watching Your Honor. She's in Your Honor.
Yes.
She's got more roles than Morgan Freeman. I mean, she's in everything. And so I was joking with Stagg last night that really there's only maybe a dozen actors just recycled like over and over again because and I guess obviously Margo Martindale is hot in Hollywood right now. Yeah. She's getting anytime there's a role for somebody who is middle-aged, starting to age, female, has a certain look. They just hire Margo Martindale.
I guess they do, and that is how Hollywood does tend to work. But I think that it's worth it. She's so fun and fantastic.
Oh, yeah, great
there's
actress.
a bunch of other crossovers too, because there's 2 other actors in Perry Mason that you watched the first episode last night, or 2 episodes. Stephen Groot is the father in Uncle Frank, and he's some kind of a city worker in like a politician in Perry Mason, I noticed. And he's in another movie we watched last week, but I can't place it right now. And he's the CIA in No Country for Old Men.
Ah, okay. Watched a couple episodes of Perry Mason. I struggled with it.
I did too.
I struggled with it because, in part, Perry Mason, for me, is something from the past that has this really, really strong structure. It's got Raymond Burr. He's a lawyer, and there's a formula, and that formula does not vary. It will not vary. It's got as much of a formula as Law and Order SVU, right? I mean, you know exactly what's going to happen before the 3rd commercial break, right? It's always the same. And well, this one, he's not even a lawyer. He's a private eye. And it's Matthew Rhys from The Americans.
1932.
And it's a period piece. And I struggled with the period bit of it as well. And there's something about the way the story is told that I had a difficult time empathizing with any of the characters and feeling a cohesion to the story. It just seemed very scattered to me.
I'm going to agree. I think it is very scattered. I think it does start to get more interesting as it progresses. And like I said, I give it a 7 out of 10, which hurts me. But I will tell you that when I watched it last night, I enjoyed it a lot more than I did the first time.
Okay.
And I think it's because I did feel like I was lost in following the story. And the way it's textured and told is very like this, rather than... There's no beat and movement in the storytelling. It's very, and Ozark is like that, but at least Ozark is punchline cliffhanger over and over again. But it's the same rhythm.
It has the watchability factor in Ozark is very very strong.
Right.
The way the characters interact is very watchable and likable, even when you don't like the characters. So there's something about the way that they tell the story which is easier to connect to than the way this is told. And I mean, if you look at Matthew Rhys's previous project, The Americans, it has that watchability factor too.
And it also had all kinds of pacing. Different pacing.
Yes.
I do have a problem with one type of pacing. Now listen, Paris, Texas, one type of pacing. Yet that is good once in a while.
It is good. And Paris, Texas is a film that I would agree is a great film. But you guys said, hey, you want to watch Paris, Texas? And I said, no, I've seen it. Don't need to do that again.
Yeah.
I just didn't need to have that level of slowness at that time.
Right.
At that particular moment in my life.
And yet we both like the slowness or the speed and the pacing, whatever you want to call it, of I'm Your Woman. So at that point, it's unique, it's new, it's different, and it worked.
Yes.
So I guess maybe it has to be fresh. Once you've seen it, you've seen it. And you don't need to go right back to it. It also, Paris, Texas stays with you so powerfully, emotionally, and visually. You don't see it. I'm still going to write a little essay on it, though.
Okay.
Okay.
And
so we recommend Uncle Frank. I highly recommend
highly recommend it.
It's so
charming
good.
film. It's really, really lovely. And it's a film about family. As we said, it's a coming out movie, coming of age movie, a road trip movie. All great themes for a movie, and they're jammed all together with some great actors, some really good writing. It's a lot of fun, and I really empathize with a lot of the characters in it,
me too.
and I liked it very much. It had one particularly lovely line in it when Frank did come out and he's talking to the individual members of the family, and there's one particular aunt who's always saying, how are things on the female front? And after
she was hideous.
Oh yes,
in The Americans,
she's having a discussion with him, and she says, well, you are going to go to hell,
I know, and she comes off as so sweet and gentle, right?
And he just handles it so well. He just says, I understand that you're being the best you're capable of.
Yeah, that was a
and he
great
moves
answer.
on. It was just
It
perfect.
was such a good answer.
You know, he didn't like cut her down.
No.
He understood that she was trying, but she couldn't get there. She couldn't. And he just was not gonna.
How was he able to do that? Because I thought that was a much more profound moment than I expected, because maybe he decided more hate isn't going to help hate.
No, and I think he had come to terms with himself.
Okay.
I think once he decided that, yeah, he's going to introduce his boyfriend to the family, and I think it was something that Beth said to him. He was really, really struggling, and he was drinking, and she said, the family wants me to bring you home, and he's not going to do it. And she brings back the conversation that they had years before when he had told her, you can be anything you want to be.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And she says, what, was that meaningless?
Yeah.
Was that only for me?
Yeah.
Right? And so he gets it. And goes and meets the family, and it's really quite a beautiful, tension-filled, anxious but beautiful set of scenes.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also kind of like he gave a gift to himself, because we were talking about gifting economy. And the thing is, I think when you want to be yourself and you want to do something, it isn't about validation. At some point, the validation is personal. The gift is to yourself.
Yes, and speaking of gifts, Frank's boyfriend, Wally, has a gift for Frank's mom.
Oh, yeah.
And the gift is, it turns out it's something that's very private between him and Frank. It's a little chain that they each have, and they always wear. And
she has a great response to that.
And he takes it off and gives it to her. And only Frank realizes what a big deal that was, right? Because she can never know. She just know how important that was in their relationship. Lovely scene.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, we're recommending Uncle Frank. Give Upload a shot for sure. Definitely worth watching.
If you finish watching The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, watch Soul.
And I'm Your Woman. Doesn't have a super fast pace, but it's a super good movie. Highly recommend it.
Oh, and I recommend The Ripper. I finished it.
Okay, I haven't started that yet.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. So good. So good. Yeah, it's much better once it's done. And I did say last week how similar to Ted Bundy it was. And it really, the Ted Bundy tapes, it's very, very similar. It's remarkable. Yeah, really good.
So if you have comments about what you've heard today or in general on the agency, you can email us at theagency.podcast@gmail.com. And of course, this podcast is available in all the good podcast places. But since we've started this podcast over a year and a half ago now, there are two other podcasts, evil podcasts, who've called themselves the Agency Podcast.
No,
but they're
copycats.
Just pale imitations.
That's right. Right.
And they deal with agency in a different sense.
True.
It's like the agency, like an ad agency, whereas we're a different kind of agency.
We can do our own ads.
Yeah,
we can do our own ads.
So also, if you would like to send us letters or send us stuff, you can send it to the agency, care of Anthony Stagg, the Emperor of Ephemera.
At Post Office Box 89101, 1859 South Ashland Avenue, Chicago, Illinois, 60608.
And I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year.
And I hope 2021 is a fabulous year for everybody.
I sure hope so.
It's great to know that the vaccines are on the scene and people are starting to get jabbed. I spoke with someone who did get their first vaccination the other day. The first person I know who has had it is a frontline healthcare worker. And it's great to see that that's starting. And I know it's going to take a while to start to build up immunity and get enough people vaccinated. But please, when you have the opportunity, get yourself jabbed. Meanwhile, wear your damn mask.
That's right. And also, sorry if we repeated any of our stories. We're really working hard on not doing that. In case we did, I apologize now. And again...
It's usually me who repeats stories.
Oh, I do too sometimes. I really thank you so much for listening. I cannot tell you how much you've helped me get through this year. We really appreciate it, and we'd love to hear from you.
And as well, we want to send special thanks to our Patreon supporters who have helped us pay the bills.
That's right.
Pay our hosting fees.
Make
get
some
get our
flasks.
mics, make some flasks, to send out to people. Which reminds me, we do have merch
In Canada, if you, I'll have some flasks coming from the States for USA listeners, and if you have a need for a flask here in Canada,
There is one left.
yeah,
There is one
$22.
left. $22. It was $25 last time.
$25.
It's
$25 shipping and handling.
Okay. So $25 including shipping. If you want one of those, and there'll be more swag and merch.
That's right. I'm inspired.
Coming because Candy is the queen of
Trying.
agency merch.
Yeah.
And I heard if you're gonna do the social medias, you have to have merch.
Yeah, you do.
So we're there.
Yeah.
And so thank you again, and we're going to be back at you very, very soon. Hopefully, we'll be able to get an episode out early next week.
Mm-hmm.
If we are late next week, please have patience with us because
I might be on the road.
Yes.
I might be on the highway. All right.
Talk to
By
you soon.
driving on the highway.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.